and welcome to Committing to Cloud Native, the podcast where we talk about committing to the cloud and also cloud native things of all sorts. This is very exciting. We have our first guest on this episode. Before I introduce our guest, can't wait to, I'm going to introduce the other panelists I have on today. I'm, of course, Richard Littauer. That's really not necessary. You don't need to know or hear from me again. I am not important. But Justin Dorfman is important. Justin, how are you doing today?
I am so important. I'm doing really good, except my dog's keeps barking. So I'm probably going to keep our editor busy.
That happens. Justin's dog is adorable. So Justin, what's going on today with Curry Fence?
All right. So by the time this is released, 1.3.0 will be out. There's been a lot of updates to the user interface and just a bunch of bug fixes and improvements. You can see the release notes. We are starting to do release notes starting this version. You could go to docs.curryfence.io and just look at the release notes to see all the different changes that we made. Really proud of the team. Flavio, Aviv, Zuri, Philip, Xavier, and Spiros really just all came together and made it happen. So yeah, that's what's going down.
Sweet. Down it goes, but also going up because that's awesome. So
exactly. You're welcome.
And our guest is Dmitry Akulov. Dmitry is calling in from Krakow in Poland. He is the founder of both Appfleet.com and jsDelivr. Dmitry, how are you?
Hey guys, fine. Thanks for having me here.
It's great to have you.
You said where Dimitri's from, and it was back in 2014. He was working with me at MaxCDN. Was it 2014 when the war was going on?
Yeah.
I'm watching the news and I see Dmitry still in Slack or IRC or whatever we had back in that day. I was like, dude, why are you still online? Shouldn't you be finding a place to not get blown up? And he's like, it's all good. As long as I have internet, it's fine. I'm like, wow. That's dedication. Yeah. What was that conflict?
Yeah, it was the conflict in Eastern Ukraine. It was the government, Russians, and local militia. It was it was complicated. And still is, it's still ongoing. I just left there.
Yeah. I just will always remember just looking at my mentor and friend, David Hensel, and be like, God, this guy's so dedicated. So anyway, back to the show.
That's kind of how I felt on January 6th, to be honest. People were like, hey, how's the deadlines? I'm like, I don't know. There's a coup going on in my country. I had a burrito. It was good. Yeah. Right. Back to the show. So tell us a bit about Appfleet. What is Appfleet?
I guess I'm going to start in the beginning. So how I came up with that, because I think it's quite interesting. So I've always had this issue where I wanted to deploy my websites, my services, my APIs to the edge, closer to users. So imagine a CDN, which is for static content, but for actual code, where you can actually run the whole thing on every single location globally. And 5 years ago, there wasn't such solution out there. You had to build it yourself, or you could try and use Kubernetes, build a federation. It was very complicated and it was very expensive. So it was basically a solution for the enterprises. I guess what happened was that after 5 years, nothing had changed. So I decided that it's time for me to solve this problem myself. Appfleet solves my problem. And I had this problem at jsDelivr, where we want to deploy our API, our website, our data processing daemons, and all that closer to our users so that they could get their information faster, better uptime, lower latency, better performance. And we already had all that for the CDN itself because we use a multi-CDN, but our API was hosted in New York. And if you're in Asia, you're stuck with that. So I built Appfleet to solve this problem. What we do is we allow you to deploy your applications in a Docker container globally closer to your users. So how it works, you as a developer, as a user, as a business, you basically compile your application in a Docker container and you provide it to us using our simple to use UI. And then you just select where you want to deploy to. You can decide to deploy to a single location and do it the old-fashioned way, or you can decide to deploy everywhere at the same time to 5 regions, 10 regions, 15 regions. And we handle all that for you. We handle the clustering, the load balancing, the routing, failover, everything. We have monitoring. You can debug your application using our UI. So it's a complete platform to run your applications on the edge. I was heavily inspired by Heroku, this idea where developer tools should be easy to use and they should be beautiful. Because before that, you could just, it's developers, okay, it's CLIs and config files, they should be fine with that. But they changed the whole thing. And I really enjoy building this kind of beautiful UIs, user experiences. And we put that whole thing in a package. And I believe we did a great job. We simplified the whole process. And yeah, basically now you have, I would call it next gen CDN. So you can basically run everything on the edge, but you're not limited by everything else. So for example, currently there are other solutions. There's Cloudflare Workers, there's Amazon Lambda, there's so many others. But what they all do is basically they force you to use their frameworks. They force you to use specific languages, versions, and so on. What I wanted was a solution that works for legacy, for your applications already exist out there. You don't have to write anything specific. So containers was the best solution and still is, I believe.
How many customers have you acquired since launching?
Yeah, so we actually haven't launched that long ago. We were in a long beta period and we had around 200 beta testers. And there are like people from all over the world. There were small developers. There are people working for Google. There's like all over the place. They provide us with some great feedback. Currently, we have around, I would say, 100 people with production use cases running on Appfleet. Yeah.
Awesome. And what kind of feedback did you get from the Google team?
Well, I guess everyone is always very nice. So it's tricky to figure out, are they nice because you have a good product or are they nice just because they're nice? But but I think overall, everyone was quite happy. So they provide us with some very good feedback. We fixed all their issues. There were some ideas about how we can do stuff like machine learning and AI training, stuff like that on the edge. So we released a few patches to basically improve that use case. But yeah, so far so good. And we basically just now starting our active marketing campaigns because so far it's been only people coming from Google or from the industry, people that know me or have heard about us.
How has this improved operations with jsDelivr? And also, can you go into jsDelivr for folks that don't know it? Like how much bandwidth does it push a day and all that other stuff, the requests, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so jsDelivr is a free CDN for open source projects. So if you're an open source developer, you can use us for free. You can push any kind of traffic you want, and it's built for production use. So currently we have, I think, almost 100 billion queries per month, and we push around 4 petabytes of bandwidth every month. And we have governments using the service. We have companies like Google, Yandex, Microsoft. I think I've seen our referrals from the US military on some website. Everyone is using that. So basically what jsDelivr does, it allows you to serve your files and your projects and your images and whatever else you have that you need other people to access. We serve it through a multi-CDN. So we use Cloudflare, we use Fastly, and in China, we use Quantio. And in China, we actually have an ICP license. So we are the only CDN that can actually operate in China freely without any restrictions.
How did you pull that off?
I guess I was lucky because it was basically a team of Chinese developers contacted me and they just asked me about how they could help us with jsDelivr and just said, okay, can you get me an ICP license? So they introduced me to the process of how that works and they kind of helped me a lot with that. And it took like 3 months to sort it out. And they actually maintain our mainland Chinese server because you have to have a server in China with the Chinese IP address to get the ICP license, even if it doesn't actually do anything. You just have to point there your DNS records for some stuff, and that's it.
But the ICP license actually does restrict things, right? Because it's run by the Chinese government.
So you can be gray listed, you can be blacklisted, or you can be whitelisted in China.
Yeah.
So by default, everyone's gray listed. So your service basically sucks there. It's very slow. It almost never works. So nobody is going to use your service in China. There's, of course, black sites, maybe YouTube and others that have bad content from the point of view of the Chinese government. But if you get this ICP license, then you become whitelisted. So you have full access, full bandwidth, no latency issues, no blocking on any level. But of course, you have to moderate your content. In case of jsDelivr, from the beginning, we decided we do not want to serve websites. So we restrict HTML files. We serve them as text. And that, I think, alone just solved all of our possible problems, because people always try to abuse this kind of service and try to serve their phishing websites, viruses, whatever else. In our case, we basically created a solution where we have a blacklist for the Chinese market and for globally. And so in some cases, we have to ban stuff like VPNs that allow people to access the outside world or the blacklisted website from China. But we do that only in China. Globally, they're still accessible. And yeah, because of that, we have gained a huge following in China. I like to Google jsDelivr sometimes, and I always get there's tutorials, there's articles in Chinese that explain how jsDelivr works, how you can use that. And so it's really, really cool.
So you're using Appfleet, which is sort of like a cloud native service. So what made you say, okay, we need jsDelivr to be able to adopt microservices and architecture and all that other fun stuff?
So jsDelivr is actually founded by me. We have sponsors, but they all sponsor us with free services. So for the servers, for freelancers, design developers, I have to pay myself. The point of that is that our budget is limited. So we go to extreme lengths to optimize our expenses. And microservices are a great way to do that, I think. So we have different modules on jsDelivr. So we have basically the external layer, which is the CDN providers. We have multiple, and we have a separate module on our infrastructure that kind of runs checks on them. It runs checks from globally, from different locations for performance, uptime checks. And what it does is analyzes data, and it decides which CDN is best for what region. And it creates these rules in our DNS system. And then if a person from New York comes in, or from Asia, from Japan, from Greece, our system knows that in Greece, Cloudflare is the best, but in New York, it's Fastly, but in Asia, it's maybe Quantio or someone else. And we keep updating these rules all the time. And if someone goes down, maybe in Russia or in Germany, we just remove that provider from our DNS. And that's how our high availability system works. So once the user has requested a file, he hits our DNS server. DNS server says what CDN he should hit. He goes to that CDN provider. If the file is cached, that's it. He gets the file. If not, it goes to our origin. So that's a monstrosity living on 6 servers in Europe. I think we are hosting in Frankfurt, Nuremberg, I think Paris. And we run everywhere because, if something goes down, we can just continue serving the files from everywhere else. What we do there is multiple things. We have our file serving module, which then, again, splits into everything that we support: GitHub, NPM, custom proxies for some open source projects. So someone wants to load a file from NPM, we download the NPM file, we cache it locally, then we permanently store it in our S3 bucket forever. That is in case if the app author decides to delete his project or his file, whatever else. In that case, we protect our users that their website will not break if that happens. Next, we, of course, log everything. So that would be a different module. We log all the requests, we analyze them, and then we build our download stats. So we analyze hundreds of billions of lines of access logs to build our download stats that you see in a small pretty graph on our website. There's so much going on behind that. And of course, if that breaks for any reason, like if NPM is down, GitHub is down, we just pull everything from our S3 bucket directly because we have all that there. And we store that on an SSD, it's cached. If base center goes down, the other one picks up the traffic. We did everything we could to optimize for production use. And this microservice thinking allows us to do stuff like we can move this module to a different provider because they sponsored us for 3 months maybe, or we can move this module to a different hosting service because it's cheaper there. And it really helps us. Of course, in this case, with Appfleet, I'm the owner, so it's not a question of that. But there's the benefit of performance, there's the benefit of the improved uptime, high availability, and all that.
What is the bus factor plan of jsDelivr? This is pretty complicated, and it's also used a lot by multiple entities. And if you accidentally, what's the more cheery one, Richard?
Yeah, so if you win the lottery and decide to buy a desert island in the middle of nowhere and decide to go there tomorrow on your new fancy yacht, what's going to happen to jsDelivr? That's a cheerier capitalist one.
Yes, I like that.
Another question I have is, who's the we? You keep saying we do all these things, and I'm just curious, how big is the team and what is the bus factor plan, et cetera?
Okay, so it's basically me and my senior developer, Martin, and it's basically the two of us maintaining the whole thing. And of course, there are people coming in, they're helping out with backend stuff, with frontend stuff, but it's mostly freelancers. So it's just me and Martin. About the bus factor, we actually have a wiki page on jsDelivr, which explains how everything should work in that case. So we have split the responsibilities between each of the, modules and systems between different people. So there's no single person other than me who has access to everything. But combined, these people can basically recreate me, my level of access to the system. And Justin, you actually listed there. So,
and that keeps me up at night sometimes. I think I need to be off because I don't think, here's one thing that is up in the air is the domains. So let's say you're on a desert island and you cannot get off. You're the next Tom Hanks or whatever. Your domain expires. Someone else registers it. What is the backup plan there? Because I can't just go in and say Dimitri put me on the wiki page though.
Yeah. So the whole jsDelivr, entity is not directly owned by me. It's owned by my company, Prospect One. And the company consists of many people. So the jsDelivr domain is on the corporate account. And that means that multiple people can have access if required. And you can actually call my lawyer and he can sign a document that gives you access to my domains, my services, and everything else. Right now, you'd have to contact my wife, or if you can find my lawyer directly, for that.
Have you ever considered putting it into a foundation?
Maybe. But the value of jsDelivr is not the software, it's the infrastructure. So there isn't much to put into a foundation other than just a bunch of passwords to just give them. So I don't think that it would work in nicely like it works for other projects.
You do realize that the majority of our listeners are bus drivers, right? Bus drivers with convictions and vendettas. Sorry. I just really wanted to make that joke.
I got it.
That's awesome. So where are you going next? What's in store?
We keep expanding. I checked the stats a few months ago and we are basically doubling in size every year.
Wow.
So we keep growing passively. We don't have the budget to do any kind of marketing or anything else really. But we still are developing many cool stuff. So the latest what we released was ESM. So we can actually compile ESM on the fly for you. So you do not have to pre-compile stuff, commit to GitHub or NPM. We do it for you. So basically act as a CI on the fly for you. And we're going to keep expanding that functionality to support more kinds of modules and tools. But still, jsDelivr is really fun, but it's not a for-profit company, right? So we are sponsored, we do our best, but we don't actually charge for anything. So for me, what I really want to do is expand Appfleet. I really want to build this into a big cloud edge platform. It can support many different use cases. So for now, for example, what you could do is deploy any kind of stateless application on the edge. You could also deploy stuff like databases on the edge. You could deploy DNS servers because we are not limited only by HTTP. We support all protocols, TCP and UDP. And what's next is support more use cases, persistent storage to do all kinds of cool stuff. We could do the Jamstack, help integration, all this cool stuff, and functions on the edge. So there's so much stuff I want to build. There's just not enough time and resources to do all that.
Well, when you say protocols, like do you see gRPC and Redis coming down the pipe, or is that just a maybe or maybe not?
Yeah, definitely. So you can already just, compile Redis into a container and just deploy it and just use it, because you can just open the port, and basically every instance of your application in every region, it gets a real IP address. We don't do any kind of NATing or anything like that. So you basically are on the internet. You can open any port you want. You can control the whole stack. So what we want to do in that context would be maybe do stuff like managed services. I want to do a globally distributed Redis. So you write Redis in New York, you read from Redis in Japan, and then you can build more stuff on top of that. That'll be on us to build, of course. Our users it's not that easy to do it yourself. So for now, you can just deploy whatever you want, but it's up to you to make it sync. Yeah. So the easiest use case, of course, is the status applications like image optimization on the fly, like build your own CDN. If your provider doesn't support some kind of feature or optimization on the fly, you can just deploy an Nginx container, configure it in the proxy mode. You have your own CDN.
And so it must take like an army of support engineers to be able to manage something of this size, Appfleet. What's that looking like? Do you have an army, or is it just small right now?
No, it's really small. So I have a lot of experience with that. I have experience from my MaxCDN days. I have experience from jsDelivr. I have built another startup in the past. We were always small, but we always built big stuff. So by now I know how to optimize early to make sure that the core of the system doesn't break in the future no matter what. So it's all about how you build your core. You can build all the bells and whistles next, and they can break. It doesn't matter as long as the core stays on. And we spent like half a year just on that to make sure that no matter what, we do not go down. You actually, when you deploy your application, we have like a little progress bar where if you like deploy one instance in one region, we say, okay, we'll do our best. But if like New York explodes, we cannot do anything about that. So as long as you're deployed in two regions, we have multiple failovers in place that to make sure that your traffic is rerouted and it's always on.
You know what, Richard? It just hit me. We might be talking to a future billionaire.
Hopefully, yeah.
I can't imagine a DigitalOcean or a AWS or a GCP coming to you and saying, either we want to acquire you to take you off the market, or we want to acquire you because we want this. So have you gotten any feelers from the major cloud providers?
Cloud providers, not yet. I've gotten lots of interest from VCs, angel investors, venture capitalists from US, Europe. They see this industry, this market as it's growing very fast. There's all kinds of startups coming out that have some kind of edge capabilities. There are multiple ones that are building edge data centers. So these mini, small buildings in different multiple cities around the world where you can deploy small servers, but it's very useful for stuff like IoT. You can build small caches for streaming, stuff like that. So for me, it'll be a really cool thing that we could basically leverage that, right? So we are building the application layer. We handle the complexity for you, but then we can utilize that infrastructure that's being built by other edge startups. You can basically get your own Akamai using Appfleet, right? We can combine the application logic from our side and with the new and up and coming edge infrastructure that is truly edge, like in multiple cities, in multiple districts over the same city. And I think in the future, that's going to be really exciting.
And your infrastructure right now, is it bare metal or do you use a number of different services?
So we have multiple services. So, from database to the caching layer, but the infrastructure itself, where we run the applications for our users, currently it's cloud instances, because that was basically the startup route, built fast, right? The easy and fast way to release the application. Next step is to migrate over to real hardware. Then we can control pretty much everything. We can build into that. We can build Anycast. We can lower our prices, offer free micro instances, all the cool stuff. For now, it's cloud. Yeah.
So I know you had a company previous to that, to Appfleet, which was VC funded. Is that what's keeping you from going that route again?
So yeah, before Appfleet, I had another company. We did monitoring for distributed infrastructure. So basically we monitored CDN providers, DNS providers, and then we did smart load balancing based on that data. And I raised $1.2 million for that. They were from 2 VCs in Europe, Germany and Netherlands. But as you see, it didn't go anywhere. The startup failed. I learned a lot from that experience. There's many differences in how things work in the US and in Europe from the VC and startup perspective. So for example, there could be angel rounds in the US where you just raised like $500,000 just from angels. In Europe, like I had offers from angels that offered me like $5,000. Yeah, so things are different. For example, the German VC, pretty much half of their money came from the Polish government. So basically, the Polish government wants to make sure that there's a startup scene in Poland. So they give out money to VCs that probably have some kind of experience in finding these startups and prepping them up. So the only requirement is that the startup is based in Poland. But there's then 100 pages of legal stuff of what you can do, what you can't do. And the VCs don't really care about that. They just push all the stuff on you. And because it's their ass on the line in front of the government, the contract they give you to sign is very bad. You're basically liable for everything. They try to make sure that if something happens, if the company never works, the company makes little money, doesn't matter, doesn't pay $10 in taxes, it's you that who's going to explain that to the government and everyone else that has given their money. Because of that, they also try to get as much control as possible. So even though they got 20% of equity in the company, the control they actually had was pretty much, they were my boss, basically. So they could fire me on the spot at any moment, literally. There are hundreds of provisions that they can take all of my equity in a second because of something that happened, because they just feel like it. So,
wow.
Of course, when you discuss that with them, they say that, yeah, it's just a precaution, just in case. Don't really, we believe in you. It's all cool. But it's still on paper, right? And you have to sign it. And of course, that was my first time dealing with VCs. And you hear the $1 million numbers and all that. It's all very exciting. They take you to a club with champagne and it's all really cool. And I'm only 24, however I was back then. Now, I don't really want to raise any VC funds in Europe. I'm doing everything bootstrapped. I think if you have the numbers, the VCs will sign any kind of contract you give them and not the other way around. Because with my previous company, the expenses were really high. So, and you had to maintain that level of expenses because the hardware and infrastructure was very expensive, even if you don't have any customers at all. So it was either go bankrupt or raise funds. The potential was there. The idea was there. The numbers were slowly growing. So of course it was like a real opportunity for everyone. But in the end, you have to basically give away all your company just for this one chance. And I don't want to repeat that.
It's like, what a bad deal. It's like, you need to take a brunt of the responsibility and liability, but we'll take all the money pretty much. That just doesn't seem like. Anyway.
Actually, when I showed this contract to Chris Euland, he was laughing. He was like, from the floor, he was laughing like for 10 minutes. Yeah, it was, dude, go away, come to Florida, come to me. We'll find you new VCs.
Yeah. Chris is the man. He hooked me up with Reblaze, which we're doing Curie Fence, and I'm having a blast so far. Hi, Chris.
So I have a question going back to Appfleet. You mentioned that it basically allows you to do legacy code, unlike, say, AWS Lambda, that you have to use their entire ecosystem. What are the other downsides? Where would I use AWS where you would actually work perfectly well?
I guess the biggest one is we don't have integration with AWS. So you can trigger Lambda functions based on events that happen in the AWS when something like a backup or whatever else. If you're already in the ecosystem and you actually use these events, then you probably would have a difficult time migrating over. But for independent microservices, I would say it would be better to use Appfleet for that.
Cool.
Because it has many downsides, like the Lambda system. There's the cold starts. We run 24/7. We don't actually shut down our resources at any moment. And of course, the biggest one, you have to use their frameworks, the outdated languages, the outdated tools. In our case, just connect your GitHub to Appfleet and hit deploy. You're live. You have your own CDN.
Makes sense. How's the community? Do you have any external contributors to your code? Is it open source?
No, it's not open source, but I do plan to build open source tools around the platform. So I had many ideas. So basically, I see Appfleet as the infrastructure provider where you can run many cool stuff. And I want to actually build all this cool stuff and make it open source and build a community around that. So I had some ideas like free CDN control panel. So if you want to build your own CDN, you can, of course, use Appfleet, and you have to basically build your Nginx config and maybe use GitHub as a storage for your config files. But what if there was an open source control panel to basically maintain your own CDN? And then you could just hit deploy the container on Appfleet, and now you have the infrastructure, the load balancing, the routing, the bandwidth, and you also have a nice UI, which you also get with other CDN providers. So then you start competing with CDN providers, right? And just by having the infrastructure. And if you go next, you can start doing stuff like better, smarter image optimization. Then you start competing with the image optimization providers, or you build open source containers for databases, and then you start competing with them. I find it really interesting and really cool that once you have this cool infrastructure, you can build unlimited awesome things around that. And you can make all of them open source, and then you basically have a win-win. We win, we get the benefit, we get the revenue, we get the new customers, and the people win because they have a new cool open source project, which they can, of course, run on their own infrastructure if they can maintain that, or just hit a click and go to Appfleet.
It's a great answer. What are your other ideas besides control panel?
Well, I guess that's the biggest one because it doesn't exist. There are no options there. I had this idea because of partially MaxCDN and then StackPath, where I've worked with so many cool people that kind of poured their soul into the MaxCDN platform. We built so many cool stuff, and now it's just deleted.
Yep.
If it was open source, it would be so cool. So I want to recreate that and make it free for everyone.
Yeah, that was Chris's baby. It's so crazy. Like every other month, he was like, okay, let's do another one. He just loved the process of creating control panels. It was an awesome control panel. It was different than anything else out there.
Well, what's nice is you have the incentives as well to build an open source community around that, because it helps you out and it actually benefits you to build open source there. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. And I kind of
ETA also, or ETD?
I would say I actually want to do it this year, like before the end of the year, I want to release something. And I actually want to somehow integrate Appfleet with jsDelivr and maybe do stuff like functions on the edge free for open source projects. So instead of using Appfleet, deploying everything there and paying money, if you're open source, you can log into jsDelivr, and we're going to have a simplified version where you can just deploy your small functions for stuff that you might need for your open source project.
That's brilliant. That's a really good
Love that idea. Before we wrap up, because we are hitting time pretty soon, I want to ask you, where can people follow along? Where can do you have a Twitter account? Do you have a newsletter? Where can people keep this conversation going with you and Appfleet and jsDelivr?
Well, obviously go to jsDelivr.com. We have Twitter, we have GitHub. Go to our GitHub, find an issue and fix that issue. It will help me a lot. And you can, of course, follow me on Twitter on, I guess, JIMAEK.
Cool. Awesome. I love that. All right. So now this is part of the show, which we're hoping to get going, which is called Spotlight. Justin and I do this on another podcast we run called Sustain. And basically what we do is just give praise back to programmers, programs, code, tools, which have gotten us to where we are, which we think just need some love and or just are awesome in general, stuff that's really great. So, Justin, can you give us an example of a spotlight today?
Yeah, I got to give major props to the folks at Katacoda. We're creating lessons, or they call them scenarios, to basically teach folks how to work with CurryFence without having to install anything on their local laptop or whatever. They've been really great in getting everything running for our March 2nd launch. So yeah, thanks, Stephen. I really appreciate all your help. And katacoda.com.
Awesome. My spotlight today is Gulp. You're talking about image optimization. That's what I used to use all the time in my open source projects. Haven't used it in a while, but just the whole Gulp ecosystem was really awesome. And I was a huge fan. I think it's probably been superseded now, but I think there's still work going on. I just haven't used it in a while, so I don't know. But Gulpers, thank you. And Dimitri, what about you?
I would say Envoy.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. We use it on Appfleet, and it's really cool because it allows us to do zero downtime deployments on single instances. So we actually route the traffic to Envoy and we replace the Docker containers beneath without losing any traffic.
Awesome. Love
That's
that.
cool.
This was a super awesome conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge and just awesome stories. And it sounds like you're doing really cool stuff. Looking forward to the future of control panels and everything else, but also just seeing Appfleet and jsDelivr go forward. Dziękuję, I think is how you say it, but I'm not really sure. My Ukrainian is awful, but trying hard.
Dziękuję. In Polish, yeah, dziękuję.
Cool. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.